We covered the Heilige Tug of Lag BaOmer, a very, very important halacha, which a lot of people think it's not so negay. In fact, a Chashuv Bacha walked past and said, Hilchos Peyas Arosh. Oh no, I don't have Peyas, so it's not negay to me. Well, this is exactly what this is for, because a lot of people talk about this, and the Chofetz Chaim himself says this as well, is that people think Peyas is that which the Gemara, for example, in Nozir Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis talks about, which is these long little chopper things behind their ears. So the Chofetz Chaim says in Mefurish, we'll see the Lashon in a moment, that's not necessarily Peyas. Yes, Tosfos in Nozir Mem Aleph Amud Beis talks about it, but at the bottom, what we're dealing with something is Nageya to every single person that ever gets a haircut. Whether you're a barber or whether you're the person in the chair. Another mistake that people make, well, I'm not the barber, so it's not negated to me. Right? Like Rabbi Witzestein just said, well, why don't we just give this to the barbers? And Chanami, right? We did, and Baruch Hashem, I was zoicha to give this share in many, many places, one of them in Heilige Lake with Ira Torah for almost 200 barbers, which was an amazing, amazing event. I was zoicha to give it in Catskills, upstate, many of the camps as well, which was a beautiful thing. And Baruch Hashem, I've been going around, whether it's in England, whether it's in South Africa, here in Eretz Yisrael and in America. It seems to be that schools are asking, we need to hear this. So obviously, there's something that people just don't know. And I always attribute it just a little bit of amaratzes. They just don't know. They don't know how chomer it is, and they don't even know the halachas. And if only they would know the halachas, then everything would be fine. Be'ezus Hashem Yisparach. So let's begin, Be'ezus Hashem, with the sugya of Peyas Arosh. It's a gewaldige, interesting sugya. If you want, afterwards, on sale for a discounted price, Pocket Halacha series on Hilchos haircuts, one of the first ones ever to come out, is available if anyone wants to Chazorah and see some of these slides inside there. Let's begin, Rabbi Isai, to understand a little bit of what's going on and understanding that it applies to so many different things and cases and haircuts and styles and utensils. So we're going to be seeing a lot of these in the next few minutes. Let's begin with the Be'alocha, as I mentioned before in Reish Nun Aleph. The Be'alocha is the Chofetz Chaim. Now, the Chofetz Chaim, as we know, did not write on Yeridea. He wrote on Orach Chaim, took him about 25 years. He was never zoicha to write in Yeridea, Choshen Mishpah, Even Ezer, right? So we don't have much from the Chofetz Chaim when it comes to Yeridea in Yonim, which is Hilchos Peyas Arosh. So over here, we have the Chofetz Chaim talking about Peyas Arosh. And you can hear that the Chofetz Chaim is passionate in his voice when he's discussing this. And he says very clearly what we mentioned a moment ago. There are bochim that think, well, Peyas is that thing that you have behind your ears. It's not negated to me. I don't have them. I don't want them. Rabbi, don't brainwash me that you need to get them. My parents are going to kill me. I don't need this. So the Chofetz Chaim know, Peyas Arosh, Nikur Rak Masha, Onu Korim Peah. In other words, that which Chazal, that which the Torah describes as being the Peah, which we are going to learn, V'hu Lav Gomu Da'oraisa. We're dealing with an Issa Da'oraisa over here. Something very chomer. It's not a chumrah, it's not a midas chasidus, it's not something that you should try not to do. We're dealing with a Lav Min HaTorah. Very, very important. So, like this. First of all, the Tashbetz brings down already in his times that the Issa V'Kobos Peyas Arosh Nachshav K'makas HaMedina, push like a plague. People just do it the whole time. People don't know. The Chofetz Chaim has a Kunjus Teferes Odom. In the beginning, he writes, "I don't understand. Amanasa Hayoim Kehefka." Again, in Radin, what were the haircuts? What were the styles? What were the fashions in Radin? I don't know. But upon him, the Chofetz Chaim understood that this is something that needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed, and it needs to be clarified. Baruch Hashem, I was zoicha to show this slideshow to Agoin HaGodel Rabbi Yisrael Auerbach Shlita. In case those of you that don't know who he is, Rabbi Yisrael Auerbach is the heilige son of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Zatzal, the son-in-law of Rabbi Elyashiv Zatzal, the brother-in-law of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal. Salamaisa, you're talking about a yid that was surrounded by Torah his entire life. Baruch Hashem saw this, liked it, and told me, go show the world as much as you can. So, the pasuk in the Torah. Let's begin with the pasuk in the Torah, because after all, we have to know where everything comes from. The pasuk in the Torah, Vayikra. Now, the literal translation of that means, don't round off the corners of your head. Now, you may say, well, what are the corners of my head? I don't have corners on my head. My head is round, Baruch Hashem. So where are the corners that I can't round off? That is something that we have to understand. Obviously, Baruch Hashem, we have Torah Shabbat Be'er, we have a Gemara in Makkas. I was asked by one of the Chaburas in the Mir who were learning Makkas Be'in to look at this slideshow because they wanted to understand a little bit of what the Rishonim were talking about, Lemeister in diagrams, like the Beis Yosef says in Orach Chaim Semishin Yud Chesif Yud when he talks about the Sugi of the Ambati. He says, well, we don't have diagrams, it's hard to know what we do, so therefore we have to be be machmeh. If you don't know what you're doing, if you don't see it inside, it's a problem. The Maharal famously writes also that the more you see something, the more senses you use, the more you remember something, the more it goes in. So Kapanim, we're going to try to describe and we're going to try to see in diagrams what is Lo Sakifu Pa'as Rosh Shechem. What exactly is the corner of the head? So if you take, for example, the head, there's no official corner, but what we're going to have to call the corner is, imagine if you would make an imaginary line as you're turning around the head and you just keep on going all the way around. That is going to have to be the corner. Now we're going to have to describe exactly what that means and what are the parameters of an actual corner. So here we have a Gemara Baruch Hashem in Machas Tav Chaf on a base. Our boys say, let's learn the sugya. Zug the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon, quoting the pasuk, Pa'as Roshai. Zug the Gemara, what does that mean? Soif Roshai, the end of your head. Frek the Gemara there is a Soif Roshai. What is considered to be the end of your head? Right, this is basically somebody that is equaling out the area of his head from the forehead to the back of his head. As you showed you before in the diagram, as we're going to see more and more, the idea over here is that you're equaling out from the hairline from the forehead all the way down to the back of your head. That means you're cutting off the corner area of your head, as we will explain. As you can see over here quite clearly, you've got the hairline from the forehead and it goes all the way down, if you had an imaginary line, to the back of the head. So rounding that off, says the Gemara in Makkos Chaf Amud Beis, that's what the Torah was talking about. That's what's going on over here. And therefore there's got to be this imaginary line. This is considered to be the Pa'as Roshai, which again, all those people that don't have payas is going to be obviously included, because everybody gets a haircut, and if you get a haircut, you're going to be touching in some way that area in the head, which is obviously included in Payas HaRosh. So you've got to be careful from that over there. Now again, moving from the forehead, going all the way down to the back of the head, going up again, and again, going all the way up to the forehead. That is what's going on, and that is what the Gemara means and understands the Torah, that is Pa'as Roshai. So this is going to be the corner of the head, right, which we're going to have to see and look and learn to see the different hairstyles, the different measurements, the different allowances that can be done. Let's just go like this. And one of the common problems that people say, and again, we heard that this morning as well, for one of the Choshev Bacham in Yeshiva, I don't give haircuts. Don't talk to me, go talk to the barbers. Zug the Gemara famously in Makkos, Echad HaMakiv, the Echad HaNikav Loika. And this is the problem. A Bacha will come back, not obviously here, but in other places, and he'll say, Rebbe, what do you want from me? I don't speak Hebrew. The guy was rambling off in Hebrew, and I just said, and he did a haircut. It's not my problem, it wasn't my fault. It's not true. The Gemara says clearly, the Shaila exactly what that means. Messiah sheyesh by mamas, Messiah she'ein by mamas, the Taz. I'm not going into the sugya, but no question about it. You have an obligation as a person receiving the haircut to make sure that the barber gives you a haircut that is 100% kosher. And if he does not, you also, says the Gemara, get malchus. Let us continue over here, and that's why you have to know when you're giving the haircut, you're in the chair, you have to know. Now, before we move on, what's the reason? We always try to understand the reason the Heilige Chinuch goes through this barichas, every mitzvah, understanding the shayrish, the tam. It's beautiful. One thing we have to know, it's called a tam ha-mitzvah. What is a tam? A tam is a taste. Now if you think about when you eat something, the ikar is not the taste. The ikar is the food that you are digesting. The ikar is the food that's going inside your body to give you koyach, to give you nutrients, to continue going, right? The taste is just a nice thing to have. You know, if you have it, beautiful, and if you don't, big deal. You got wonderful food. The taste is just an added milah that the Rebbeinu Shalom put in the world to give beautiful taste to the things that He created. That's wonderful, but that's not the ikar. Therefore, when we look for a tam ha-mitzvah, it's not the ikar of the mitzvah. It's just the flavor, just to give it a little bit more vibrance, to get a bit more geshmak. So we have over here a Rambam. The Rambam says that this was the way that they used to be oved avodah zarah. They used to cut their hairs in ways, fashions of goyim were such that they did avodah zarah in this way. So the Rambam, stay far away. You can't do this because it's a shaila of avodah zarah. Zug the Torah, what are you talking about? That's not pshat. Mitzvahs melachim. The Torah says very clearly, that's not the reason. It's mitzvahs melachim. The Rebbeinu Shalom has told us to do this, therefore we do it. Zog the Taz, Sikat and Aleph. What happens if a person has a situation that would be enough kamina between two reasons, right? There's a truth in there. There's tzvi. What happens, for example, there was a guy that had tremendous problems with spots in his head, and the only way the doctor told him that he would be able to relieve himself from that would be to shave off with a razor all of the hair on his head. There's no other way of doing it. So his shaila was, is he allowed to do such a thing with a razor? We'll talk about it in a moment. But are you allowed to do that, or is that problematic? And the Maisa, again, I'm not going into the sugya now if it's Nageya, which it should never be Nageya, but for anyone it's Nageya to ask a local Orthodox rabbi. But what he said over there was, he wanted to say that it's enough communion between the Rambam and the Torah, which Betzim the Taz says as well. That Lefi the Rambam, if the reason is because of Avodah Zarah, so if you're not doing it, and it's clear that you're not doing it because of Avodah Zarah, then it will be mutter. But if it's because mitzvahs melachem, it's because the Rabban Shem told us to do it. Just because he told us one reason, and that reason may not apply, doesn't mean that all the other reasons don't apply. That the Vilna Gaon says in Hilchos Milah the same way. So therefore we have to know that we have these two reasons, and the Torah says it clearly in the Taz also, that it's because the Rabban Shem told us to do it. That is the reason that we do it. Now we have over here a famous machlekes between the Rambam and the Rosh. What exactly is asa? What does it mean to take off the corners of your head? How do you have to take it off that makes it problematic? So we have a Rambam where the Rambam says rak ta'ar. That means if you take a razor and you razor off that corner, which we will describe in a moment, then it will be problematic, and it's included in the Issa, asa. That means, according to the Rambam, if it's what we call ke'ein ta'ar, that means it's not the razor itself, but it's something similar to the razor, then that will be mutter. Comes along the Rosh and says no, ke'ein ta'ar is also asa. According to the Rosh, any method of getting it off will be forbidden and therefore has to be avoided. Shulchan Aruch lemaisa paskins like the Rambam, but says to be machmir v'shitas harosh. If that's the case, then if the Shulchan Aruch is telling us to be machmir v'shitas harosh, then it means that ke'ein ta'ar is going to be asa, and any method of removing the hair in that area will be forbidden. Right? Now, we're going to have to talk a little bit about the hair itself and what is the length of the hair that will be mutter or will be asa. But clearly, again, according to Shitas HaRosh, that any method of removing the hair, whether it's done with scissors, whether it's done with a machine, is irrelevant, because ke'ein ta'ar, similar to a razor. If it does a similar job, it's included in the Issa and is going to be asa. Now the question is, what does it mean, ke'ein ta'ar? What is the definition of how short it has to be? So there's a famous Rambam, which is paskin also, as you can see from the Rivosh, the Meiri, and other Rishonim, which people know means that you fold it over and it touches itself, which is approximately 5 millimeters. That is okay. But if it cannot do that, that's ke'ein ta'ar, and that will be asa. According to the Shach, which the Mishnah Pashtus, Chachmas Zodom, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and others, Somach Labasa ke'ein ta'ar, Gemara Nazir by the Sugya of the Nazir, which Lamaisa, Rukiv Eged Chasam Sofer, when I sat a long time with a Goyin Agadol Rabbi Israel Orbach, and he told me, and this is what the psak I saw from many other Rabbonim as well, is it's approximately 0.5 centimeter, 3 to 6 millimeters, which is on most, not all, machines, and I say machines, I mean haircut machines, not beard trimmers. It's a whole different number. Clearly, hair cutting machines, most of them, they could come up with new ones that I'm not aware of, so I don't want to say all of them, but I think all the ones that we know of, most of them. And number 2, you're good. You're for sure good if you take a number 2 and you do anywhere, okay, with the exception of one thing which we'll mention in a moment. But generally, if you say I want a number 2, nothing under a number 2, generally, apart from one thing which we'll mention in a minute, you're okay, because a number 2 will get you more, just a bit above 0.5 centimeter, between 3 and 6, and you'll be okay. And therefore you're for sure well over ke'ein ta'ar, and you're okay. That's no problem. Again, with the exception which we'll get to, which is important. So that is the length of the hair. Now what we have to figure out, and that's very important, is now we know what's going on, and what the issue is, we have to look at the 3 points of the payas. We've got point number 1, we'll call by the forehead, and then again we've got this imaginary line going all the way to call it number 2, which is right by the ear, and then we're going to have it all the way to point number 3, which is going to be the cutoff between beard hair and head hair, okay, which is quote unquote by the bone, which we'll discuss. These are the 3 points of the payas, which means that once we've defined these 3 points, anywhere within those points is called pa'as roisha. It's the corner of your head, which the Torah says clearly don't cut off. We've described already what the definition of cutting off is. Rosh and Rambam, we paskin like the Rosh, anyway, and any method. So now we have to figure out where is this on our heads, because obviously every person is different. I remember spending hours in some of the camps up in the Catskills with boys go like, okay, where's it on my head? Where's it on my head? And sometimes people don't want to know. People have interesting, ways of their level of their head and their hairlines and everything change according to each person. So we have to understand that. Again, the 3 points of the payas we're going to describe. But number 1 by the forehead, number 2 by the ear, and number 3 by the bone. And again, this is what the imaginary line that takes us, as we mentioned in the beginning, a rounding off from the forehead hair line all the way to the back of the head. So interesting enough, this picture on the right was actually drawn by Reb Chaim Kanievsky, by the Steipler, Reb Chaim's father, and the Steipler drew it because he was the barber of the Chazon Ish. So can you imagine the Chazon Ish only trusted the stipler to give him haircuts, and the stipler drew a picture of what is mutter and what's asa. Now, I don't know, how you can figure this out. So on the left, we have the art scroll version of the stipler's picture, which they took to Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, and he paskened that yes, that's what his father, the stipler, meant. Now you can see clearly on this picture what is mutter, what's asa, and especially when we're talking about the top of the ear. And again, everything we're discussing over here has that basically idea, and has the psak of Ragoin, Rebbe Zul Orbach, Shlita. So we'll go with number one. Let's talk about point A, which is the point by the forehead. Everybody has a different forehead. Everyone has a different hairline. How do you judge it? So there's a famous Yad HaKtana. The Yad HaKtana says that everyone's forehead is different. You have to go by each person's forehead, which means if you've got a high hairline, you'll go with that. If it's lower, then you'll go with that. But it's the top point, not the point down over there, but it's the top point where your forehead, on the top of your head, sort of stops and things start to go downwards. That is where the beginning and point A of the imaginary line. So this guy over here has a very low hairline, right? So over here, in a way, his area of the Peis HaRosh is going to be much smaller than the guy before, as we already mentioned, right? So here is a clear example of what I mentioned to you by the Yad HaKtana. The Yad HaKtana says that each person is different. So this guy, for example, will start from over there, and this guy will start from over there. Everyone's got a different point of where the hairline starts, and therefore their point will be a consideration. It's a good question. What happens if someone starts losing his hair? What din does that have? Good shaila, not for now, not Nageya, ask a local Orthodox rabbi. But again, everyone's got a different hairline, and you have to go with each person's hairline according to what you are. This one, for example, would be over there. Just to give you more and more examples will definitely help. So I'll give you an example, right, of this one. Take this guy over here, Lo Aleinu. This guy on the right thinks he's being a great Sefroma with Langer Pious, which is very, very nice. I'm not going to go into that. Rizal talks about it by Richos. But Al Kaponim, he's obviously being overcome. He's Sui Doraisa, thinking he's being so choshev with the pious. It's not true, because at the end of the day, he doesn't realize he starts from over there, not from over there, right? And unfortunately, people don't know that. Now, it's very Nageya, maybe more the Hasidim, where they have a really short haircut everywhere else, because then they have to be really make sure that they know where they're stopping and where they're starting, right? Because it's obviously very, very dangerous. I always say that it's like almost walking between Twin Tower A Zatzal and Twin Tower B Zatzal with a tightrope. Can you imagine? Maybe you'll fall, maybe you won't fall and die. That's what it is. Over here we're dealing with something which is a shaila of a daraisa. Maybe a daraisa in every single hair. And people are like, yeah, figure it out, whatever it may be. Chas v'shalom, got to be makbid every single thing. It's so choshev to make sure we know. And this is even for those people who say, well, I'm not Chassidish, I'm not having longer pious. What do you want from me? Even a Litvish guy wants to have a zah pious over here. Again, it starts from over there. What is he doing? Shaving this area over here lower than the shear, as we mentioned previously over there. Now, this is an interesting shaila which I don't want to go into now, but this is very again when you make an option again. People make huge mistakes about people come to my house with the kids, show me exactly where before I do it, because again, we're dealing with a Shavah D'Oraisa. Nobody wants to mechanech their children and give their children their very first haircut and be'isa D'Oraisa gomel. But unfortunately, people don't know that halachos, and even is sur D'Oraisa after D'Oraisa, and this child is kavaldik with the honey and the olive base and the talus. It's beautiful, but isa D'Oraisa on him chaval. So therefore, it's a shaila which I'm not going into, but the pashtus over the eyes generally is okay, but that's a very general statement, so I don't want to go too much into detail, but it's not negated to us right now. But generally baby hairs, which are clearly baby hairs and fall away, are not going to be included in that over there. Okay, so you have to know. Let's move on, Rabbi Say Abyssal Vaita. Again, this is something also very again. Unfortunately, people just like things to look neat and tidy, and because of that, they're over Nisura D'Oraisa after Issa D'Oraisa is definitely not Kedai. So point A we have pretty clearly, the top of the area of the forehead. Point B, the Gemara tells us, and the Ritva says it very, very clearly in the Gemara in Makkas, L'mala min ha'oizen somuch la'oizen. So if I want to figure out exactly where is the point B, where the end of the imaginary line ends, it's going to be like this: L'mala min ha'oizen somuch la'oizen. So the top. Now we saw already the picture, if you remember, of that stipler Jew which Reb Chaim Kanievsky gave in his show. This is it. It's the top point of the ear. The highest point of the ear over there is the end of the imaginary line, and therefore you cannot go within that area. Behind it is no problem, but within that area you can't go lower than the number that we mentioned, and it's very clearly the top of the ear. Inwards is considered to be a pair. Under there, behind there, no problem. Back of the ear, no problem. But within that area, it's problematic. By the way, this is going to be a problem for every single person that has a haircut, because as we'll see, that's going to be quite nageya. Now, here, I couldn't take this picture very clearly because otherwise the guy would kill me that I'm taking a picture of him, and showing it publicly all over the world. But this is a Hasidic guy, and again, lange pious, very nice, but over here, he shaved very clearly. There's no shaila about it. He's over in Kama Isurei Doraisas, and it's a problem. Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't get such a clear shot, but that's as far as I managed to get. That is going to be problematic. Again, under the payas area, again, if it's within the area of the bone which we're going to mend to, is problematic. Now, straight around is subject to a shaila. Those of you that learned the Sugya, the Pesach Tshuva brings from the Arizal, there's a famous Chazon Ish that says you round it off simply because you want to make sure that you're not being over. In other words, if you're going on the borderline, why would you go exactly close to the border so you may fall off? They build a fence a little bit further away, right? The Mishnah says at the beginning of Pirkei Avos, first Mishnah, right? You got to make gedorim, sag l'Torah. You got to make sometimes a geder so you're not over in the Yisur Doraisa. And that's basically, according to many Chazon Ish, especially where the round idea comes from. But of course, there's also an Arizal Shlish Metzach, which is a subject of Machlokes and Achronim, exactly what the Arizal meant, which of course at this moment we're not going into over here. Let's move on. We have point number 1. We have point number 2. Where's point number 3? Now we are not discussing very clearly shaving beards. We're not getting into it. It's not our sugya bechlal. But obviously we're going to have to know the cutoff point of where's beard hair and where's the hair that belongs to your head. Nafkamina being how close can you go and how close can you go to the skin. So the Rivan says again, sugya and makas, kavaldiga sugya. Zuk the Gemara, zak and the beard. Where does the beard begin? Lamata mina oizen, under the ear. Right? What does that mean? And the Ritva says this very clearly. Mokim shalechi atachton yoytze umisbared sham. Now that's very hard to understand when you learn the Ritva. What does he mean? Rabbi Ritva, could you maybe make a diagram? Maybe I can see what it is. So Rabbi said we're going to learn a little bit of biology to see the Gavaldige Neflois HaBoira, how the Rebbeinu Shalom created our Gavaldige Guf, our Gavaldige bodies. And let's have a look over here. This is a picture of the human skull. The Gadlus, how the Rebbeinu Shalom created it, is for a different shmooze, but this is amazing. Now we have over here many things, some of which I can't really pronounce, but we have definitely one thing which is clear, and that's called the zygomatic arch. The zygomatic arch over here is, you could actually even see it on the diagram, is it's slightly coming out, right? Now that is what most of you grew up with, of this idea of the bone. You're allowed to go until the bone. What does that mean, the bone? So it means the zygomatic arch, right? And this is obviously the jawbone, right? That obviously moves every time you open your mouth. Tremendous iflois haboyer, how the Rebbeinu created our guf is unbelievable. But this zygomatic arch does not move. And that pashtus is the bone that everybody grew up with. Oh, you're allowed to go till the bone. When you shave, that's no problem, right? Okay, Rabbi say tomorrow, like ba'omer, or maybe not tomorrow, could be the next day. Ashkenaz was fun, I'm not going into it. But that is definitely something we have to understand. Now let's have a look a moment at what this is. Rashi, the Ritva, clearly. Mokoim shalechi atachton yoytze umisbarid. Now, lechi atachton is the jawbone. That's not the zygomatic arch. What's the zygomatic arch got to do with the jawbone? Right? And in fact, not only that, Reb Moshe, when they came to Reb Moshe Zatzal, and they asked him, until where can I, make a short haircut, where can I shave to, whatever. So he said, very simple. Do it on your own self, and try this one right now. It's very simple. Open and close your mouth and hold the bone. That bone that everybody grew up saying you're allowed to go to. Does it move? No, because it's the zygomatic arch. It shouldn't be moving. You might feel a vibration, you might feel something, but it is not moving. If you go slightly lower than that, in towards where the whole of your ear is, so there you feel movement, that is the lechi hatachton yoytze umisbarid sham. And that is what we're dealing with. That's what the Rishonim say, and that is the area that you're allowed to go till. And that again is right over here, which not the zygomatic arch. The zygomatic arch is the bone which is higher up, and that is not allowed. And that's why it's problematic for a person to realize where this is. In example, you see over there, you can see quite clearly. There it is. There's the zygomatic arch, and there it is. And that's an amazing idea because people have the wrong idea. They think you can go to the bone. It's slightly lower than that is where a person is allowed to go to, and that's considered. So again, depending on the different minhagim, obviously that's too short, and that's fine, but it may be even too long. According to some poskim, we do that also. There are different sheetas in the poskim. I'm not going through it now. There are sheetas in the poskim. You go all the way to the earlobe, or the pashtus of Shulchan Aruch, and many gedolim is number 2, which is the line which is basically the bottom of the earlobe, the whole of the ear. That's where you can go to that. In other words, above there is considered to be part of the Peyas HaRosh and must not be under a number 2, must not be trimmed in an area that is poshet too low. So for example, this, which you may look at this and say, well, nobody in the right normal mind of a Yiddish neshama would ever love to have such a haircut like this. I gotta tell you, in my travels around the world, I've seen otherwise. And unfortunately, people think that the fashions that they see on different screens and whatever has to be copied because it's cool and it's geschmack. We'll talk about the Chofetz Chaim in a moment. But Al Kaponim, here we can see clearly we're dealing with an Issa D'Oraisa. This guy that's trimming off the corner of his hair. People do this. I've been called to schools. I've been called tonight to go to a certain yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. Please come. We have this problem. I'm going tonight, Be'ez Hashem, at 6 o'clock to discuss this exact situation. Right? Obviously the whole sharing Gunson. But this is a huge, huge problem. Somebody that does this, and they do it to look neat, to look cool, to look in, to look fashionable. Again, not Keneged HaTorah. Again, people just don't know. And if they knew this, they would never do it. They probably just didn't know it was Asa. They never knew it was problematic. So what we call the pencil payas, where they make it very, very thin, that is obviously problematic. This actually is a real picture that I took myself of one of my Talmidim. This was going back at least probably 15 years ago. A bocha that he did one side, then he was embarrassed. He said, well, I can't just do one side, I need to do the other side also because it's got to look equal, right? So I said, do me a favor, can I take a picture of you? Can I take a picture of you and we'll use it as a kapara, right? We'll show people what not to do, and this way people will say, Gavaldig, I won't do that. And this is what he did. Look, he trimmed it off. You could see quite clearly, right? I don't know how well you could see it, but there are definitely hairs over there that have been trimmed all the way down to the skin. And therefore, 1,000%, this guy over here, unfortunately, was over and come overcome a sui d'oraisa. The person has to be careful in that case. Again, you see another example over there. Shemi Rachim. Okay, let's move on, Rabbi Isai. Similar case over here, just a few more examples of what's going on. Now, this is where it's the gay. This is what I wanted to discuss. People say, okay, no problem. Until now, great Shea Rabbi, but I don't have less than a number 2. So I'm okay with this. I don't have to worry about this. That's not true. Even if it's right that less than a number 2 is not such a problem around your whole head. However, what the barber normally would do, and we'll get a confirmation in a moment, is he goes around the area around the ear. Now, behind the ear, we don't care about, because that's fine. It's from the top of the ear inwards is the problem. Now, go and have a look tomorrow at people's haircuts, and you will see that for some reason it looks very neat and tidy around the ear. Now, there's no way that he took the number 2 guard and went around your ear. It's not going to work, right? You've got to take off the guard. And again, Baruch Hashem, I've spoken to so many barbers in the years who've all confirmed that this is a huge problem. They like it to look neat and tidy around the ear area, so the barber goes around with scissors, he takes off the guard of the machine and goes around. And if it goes less than a number 2, then obviously it's going to be problematic, and that will be, again, which often he goes way up, even with scissors, even without a guard, is going to be asa. So even if you take a number 2, 3, 4 around your head, but if the barber goes around the ear to make it neat and tidy, that's going to be problematic. What you should do is, and again, go to a Yerushalayim barber, is put a comb in there, that makes sure that's the minimum shear, and around the comb, and I'll use the comb as like a guard, that it shouldn't go too close to the skin, right? Again, there are, by the way, in Eretz Yisrael, we're zoicha to have hechsherim on barbers. I don't know if any of you ever saw it. In fact, somebody contacted me last week. He wants me to get involved and start going to different places that I don't have enough time. But there are people that mashkichim now that go around from barber to barber and they do spot checks, and they even pretend to be the guy in the chair, and they ask for an Asa haircut to see whether or not the guy will give them a haircut. They'll lose their hechsha. And there are a lot of people that don't have haircuts from someone that's not a Yerushalayim, that doesn't know the halachas. Baruch Hashem, I've been zoicha to give my book to various barbers who, Baruch Hashem, followed the halachas, and it's wonderful. It's a tremendous chus. But again, guys, we have to be careful. This is something you've got to be very careful of, because it happens whether you're using scissors. Any area around the ear area is included. It's as if you've taken off the area over there, as we have mentioned. Now, this is an interesting shaila. In England, we call it the boots. Right? What's the din around the hair area of the cheek? Right? You're allowed to take that off. There are people that use, well, you can call them L plates, you can call them boots, sort of different names that they've given them. Are you allowed or not? I don't want to go into it now, but I remember discussing this with Agoin Rafal Zatzal, and Be'etzim, the Beis Yosef brings it in the Bach also, that anything in the cheek area is generally not considered to be Peyas HaRosh. It's considered to be beard hair, and therefore is subject to the shaila of shaving, which we're not going into at this moment on time. Combing the payas. So what does that mean? That means if you take a comb and you comb the area in which we have discussed and described as being a payas, is that considered to be a problem? All of us are familiar with the Gemara in Nazir. All of us are familiar with the Shulchan Aruch and Ender Simon Shin Gimel, where it talks about on Shabbos. We're taking a comb on Shabbos, Avada is asa, because you're plucking out hair. So what do we do over here in this case? So there is a moedik Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer in Yodei Sebekuf Lametes. The Chasam Sofer brings down that Avada is mutter. You know why he says it's mutter? Listen to his answer, it's amazing. He says, because I saw my Rebbe, Reb Nosson Adar, doing it. If my Rebbe did it, I know it's mutter. And then after that, he goes through the sukkah to explain why combing is mutter, not nechah in the Gemara in Nazir, not nechah in the Shulchan Aruch Shin Gimel in the Hilchos Shabbos, and therefore combing your payas, even if it may go out and take out some hair, we're not so worried with that happening. The Maisa, there's no problem in combing, whether you've got long payas or short payas, to comb the area of the payas, even if one hair may fall out, that is not a problem. I discussed the shaila with going to Rabbi Zil Orbach about plucking hair in the area of your payas, and he said that's not the derech. Avada, a person should try not to, but it's definitely not considered